For this presentation, I will go over how this standard relates to what I teach in my classroom and how I make this standard evident in what I do. I will also talk about each guiding question and how I approach content accessibility and instructional resources. Standard 4 states that the teacher understands the central concepts, tools of inquiry, and structures of the disciplines she teaches and creates learning experiences that make the discipline accessible and meaningful for students to assure mastery of the content. In my art classroom, I try to engage all of my students in projects that combine skill building, art history, 21st century skills, and contemporary art practice. I teach 9 different grade levels, all different kinds of art making. While it is impossible to understand and know every single possible art technique for what I teach my students, I try to do a fair amount of research. My background is in clay, photography, and costuming, and I like a lot of color. So when I am on the hunt for a new project, this is where I start. I like to start research from my interests and branch out from there. When I start researching projects from what I know and where my interests lie, it's a lot easier for me to get excited about what I am teaching and possibly learning new techniques along the way.
I even turned a lot of the creatures into costumes for humans. I thought of it more as a stage from that point.
More of a dance element and kind of almost like a Broadway show.
I also think it's important to note that trying new things helps you learn new things. Just because my background isn't in printmaking does not mean that I will not teach printmaking. I love teaching new techniques and processes to my students because it puts us all on the same playing field. We all end up asking questions, taking risks, and figuring things out together. I'm pretty comfortable using all different kinds of materials, but I also like to show my students that it's okay to try new things, make mistakes, and figure out new and better solutions for creating a finished artwork. Guiding question. Does the candidate understand subject area concepts and tools of inquiry to make the content accessible and attainable to all students? My art classes are fun, but I am strict. The students know that I take art making very seriously. Part of the reason I am strict is because we use a lot of tools in my classroom that can be very dangerous if used the wrong way. But I am also strict because I think having a practice of anything, but especially an arts-based practice, takes discipline, efficiency, and hard work. So I try to model this for my students with everything we do in our art classroom. I also try to balance being strict with giving a fair amount of freedom. Freedom gives permits for risk-taking, creativity, and brainstorming. The freedom I give to my students to be creative with whatever theme or project we are working on draws them in. It acknowledges their individualism, allows for differentiation, and helps make the arts accessible and attainable to all of my students. Guiding question. Does the candidate use appropriate instructional resources that are comprehensive, accurate, and appropriate for students? Because I have been teaching for so long and in such varied locations like community centers, shelters, private school classrooms, English teaching centers, clinics, international school classrooms, college campuses, libraries, and public school cafeterias, I am really adaptable and efficient with the materials and tools that I use. Currently, I teach 3-year-olds all the way up to 15-year-olds. While I have been teaching elementary school students for about 25 years, I have only been teaching nursery and middle school students since about 2015, which is about 4 years. This means that I have to find instructional resources for my youngest students and my oldest students, and their skill level is so incredibly different that it takes looking in all sorts of places to find accurate and age-appropriate projects. Plus, I constantly have to keep the National Art Education Standards in the back of my brain to make sure I am hitting all of the key concepts and core arts anchors, which are broken down into creating, presenting, responding, and connecting. Here are some examples of where I generally hunt for fun new projects for my nursery littles and my grade 7 and 8s. The Art of Education. This website is really awesome. Like Teach Now, they offer various coursework for professional development and they hold 2 conferences a year. I like to read the articles that are posted on their site and look through their collective of lesson plans, which are broken up by grades and materials. I like that you can download lesson plans and they are kept to one page. I usually use these lessons as a starter lesson for a bigger unit or project. I also look for projects on Instagram. While I'm not a huge fan of Pinterest, I do look through hashtags for project ideas on Instagram. Some of my favorite accounts for lesson plan ideas are Miss Lee Art, Art Camp LA, Oil and Cotton, and Handmakery. I catalog all of the work I do with my students on my personal website, but also on Instagram through class hashtags. Hashtag my lovely grade ones, my lovely second graders, my lovely third graders, etc. This way I can go back and reference past ideas. Cassie Stevens' YouTube channel. She is pretty set in the land of grades 2 through 5, but I find her projects can be really engaging for students of all ages, and she makes fun videos that the students like to follow. I use her projects as a jumping off point too. I know this was a pretty art-centric presentation, but hopefully it helped you all get a better understanding of how I go about preparing for and ensuring I have met Standard 4 of content knowledge. Thank you so much for listening. Please reach out with any questions.